I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Madam Secretary, will you call the roll for this public hearing?
Yeah. Mr. Bay? Mr. Fee?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Matthews?
Yes, ma'am.
Mayor Hudson?
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Cavalcante?
I will go ahead and ask the motion to excuse the chairman of the board. And I hear a motion for that.
Linda here, so moved.
A second?
Second.
I hear one? Okay. It's been moved and properly second that we excuse Ms. Linda to this public workshop, budget workshop. All in favor?
Aye.
Let it be known by saying aye. Call the roll.
Mr. Bay? Oh, Mr. Fee?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Matthews?
Yes, ma'am.
Mayor Hudson?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, as the agenda here this morning, we have approximately 5 items. I hope if we do have 6, we'll add it on. We're going to go ahead now and follow item 1. We're going to give the welcome and introduction by our executive director.
Thank you, Mr. Matthews. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the fiscal year 2021 budget workshop. This is an annual meeting where FPUA presents the draft budget to our board, the City Commission, to solicit comments and questions before formally submitting it to the board and ultimately City Commission for their final approval. The board package contains the complete capital and O&M budgets for FY 2021, as well as the presentations you will see this morning. The presentations focus on major capital projects, some of which you are familiar with and some of them are new. I want to emphasize that this is a draft budget. While we don't expect many changes to the O&M budget, there will be modifications to the capital budget. The draft budget has been sent to our rate consultant, Raftellus, for them to prepare a rate sufficiency analysis. The draft rate sufficiency analysis indicated that additional budget trimming is required to maintain our current rates, even with the application of the PSC index for water and natural gas, which we assumed we were going to have to do. The draft sufficiency review indicated we can only spend 30% of our capital budget without making rate changes. And since we normally spend on average about 50% of our capital budget, we need to evaluate cutting some projects or more likely deferring them to later years. A couple of quick words on the O&M budget. The total budget has increased 0.8%, with the majority of those increases associated with personnel, employee benefits, and contractual services. This has been partially offset by savings in purchases for resale, which is the cost of our wholesale power and natural gas. We've included in the budget a 3.5% raise pool, which would be administered similar to the last 2 years. The 3.5% was a recommendation from our compensation consultant. And when I say it would be administered similar to the last 2 years, we would separate 2% for COLA and 1.5% for incentive pay. Now, we certainly recognize that in the current economic climate, these salary adjustments may not be possible, but our salary adjustments are normally made in October or later, which may be a different economic climate than now. It's also important to note that we need to be careful that our compensation policy continues to be up to date so we can retain and hire the best people available. I think we all recognize that, despite the COVID-19 pandemic, Everybody's still making electricity. All the power plants are running, and all the folks required to deliver electricity to our customers are still working. So nothing has changed, at least in that theater. We've also increased the budget for health care to be sure we've adequately funded our self-insured plan. And we had a meeting with our consultant on that a couple of weeks ago, and I was trying to get a feel for, how COVID-19 might affect the rates for next year. And the indications are it may be a wash from the standpoint that there'll be additional COVID-19 expenses, but we're seeing less expenses from people going to the doctor or doing follow-ups or elective surgery, which is kind of canceling it out. I expect that that'll probably flip over. I don't know when it'll be in the next few months, but it may not have as bad an impact to the budget as I thought it might be. We have a schedule for some remaining activities for this year's budget preparation, which I wanted to tell you about. The budget will go to the FPUA board for approval on July 7th. We'll submit it to the city by July the 22nd, and the budget will be presented to the City Commission for approval on August the 3rd. So with that said, let's get started with some of the details, and the first presentation will be the overall budget review by Barbara Micah.
Thank you, Mr. Tompak, and thank you, Chairman and board members and guests, for being here today for the fiscal year 2021 budget workshop. Many hours of preparation and planning go into developing the budgets. It's not just a finance effort. It takes the efforts of all the directors, department heads, and staff working together to develop this financial plan. The budget process begins in March when we roll out the budgets to the departments. About 4 to 6 weeks later, they're submitted back, and those budgets are compiled for review by the Budget Review Committee and management. We discuss the needs and the wants and make the appropriate adjustments. Today, we are having our virtual workshop to explain what staff has put together in their budgets for the next fiscal year. After today's meeting, we will make some necessary changes, and we will present the individual O&M and capital improvement plans to the board. What is being presented today is, as Mr. Tompak said, is a draft. We are looking for your input so that we can make the required changes prior to presenting the final version for the board for approval. This graph shows the total budget, which includes all funding sources. In fiscal year 2021, the purchases for resale make up about 41% of the total O&M budget. The expense for purchase resale is one that we cannot control. The FPUA has no control over those costs. Purchases for resale have been declining since 2018, which is the red bars here, since 2018 by about a little over 4%. Fiscal year 2021 budgeted purchases for resale are almost 2.5% lower than the original budget for the current fiscal year. As Mr. Tompak said, the O&M budgets, which are relatively flat, they're up just about 0.8% in the categories of the salaries, employees insurance, and some other categories of professional fees, and again, offset being to the purchases for resale. The rate-funded budgets exclude any non-cash expense items, depreciation, amortization, and accretion, and the contingency is not included in here. Rate-funded O&M budgets are up from 2020, the original budget, by 2.5%, which is offset by the reduction in that cost of the purchase power. The rate-funded capital budgeted for 2021 is 4% lower than the original 2020 budget for capital, for rate-funded capital. This table trends those rate-funded original budgets that were presented in the previous slide for the fiscal year 2018 through 2021, with the changes year over year and the cumulative changes over the past 3 years. The purchases for resale reflects the steady decline over these past 3 years for the cost of purchase power. This graph compares the original budgets to actual amounts spent in those respective years. Looking at the increase for the over the 2020 original, we typically the end result of our actual O&M spend comes in below the original projections. Last year, 2019, we were below the original by 4.6%, and the previous year in 2018, our original budget versus our actual spent, we were below that by 6.5%. So although we have the budgets seem like they're creeping up, we typically don't spend all of our budgets. Depreciation in 2021 is up $1 million from the previous year, but it's more reflective of what we budgeted in 2019. Capital budget. Overall capital budget for the overall capital budget, excluding what's marked here as carryover, because it's not in here. The overall capital budget, excluding that, is down actually almost 2% from the original 2020 budget. And you can see the actual 19 versus the original in 19. Spending is below what we're typically budgeting, projects being carried over to the next year. So we're not spending all of our budgets, but this is what we're looking at here for capital. This is our capital budget by funding source, and this table shows how the 2021 budget, with 72% of the budgeted capital funded by rates, 18% is funded by contributions and aid and capital improvements, and 18% will be funded by debt, future debt, and we set 2% aside for contingencies for a total capital of the $22.3 million. This is all that I have to present on the overall look at the budget. Our next presenter would be Mr. Hutchinson on the water and wastewater capital project overview. Thank you very much.
Any board member has a question?
Yes, Mr. Matthews.
No, I'm asking if any board member have a question.
To Linda Hudson, no, I'm good.
Okay. Bob, I have one concern. We getting ready to get into the hurricane and disastrous time of life. What consideration we did for that? I couldn't find it.
A consideration for, well, we have contingencies. We typically try to, if we're preparing in that we're preparing and stocking our inventory so that we have the materials we need if we have some kind of a situation or storm where we have the materials we need to make repairs. We typically have, we don't budget for those. If we take money out of contingency, and then if something is a declared storm or disaster, we certainly look to apply for public assistance through FEMA. So we don't budget for those expenses.
And I think, Barbara, the other thing we should mention is that we do have an emergency reserve of $900,000 in restricted assets that's available for that as well.
Are there any other questions?
Yes, I have one question. This is Hank Fee. On the capital budget, you mentioned, actually it's a total budget. Looking at that graph, you mentioned that the purchases for resale have been declining since 2018. Does management have any idea why there's a continual decline?
Yeah, I think the answer, I think the answer is that the FMPA has done an excellent job of keeping the rates low, and we're running very efficient units for FMPA. And of course, the critical issue is that the price of natural gas, which is the the overwhelming source of fuel for our power plants, has gotten very low. Those are the things that are really driving down the price of purchase power.
Is this just an anomaly, or do you think this is going to be a continuing trend for a couple more years?
I suspect, you're asking me to predict the cost of natural gas, and I've been very unsuccessful doing that in the past. I think, give you an idea, right now, natural gas today is $1.72 a decatherm, which is very low, and I don't think that's sustainable. But even if it goes up to $2.25 or $2.50, that's still workable and will still keep our rates at a very good level.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Tom Peck, would you present the next item?
Yes, next item is the water wastewater capital project overview, and Bo Hutchison will make the presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Tom Peck. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Today I'm going to present some highlights of the water and wastewater capital budget for the upcoming fiscal year. Okay, first off, water distribution. This project is main services and valve replacements. It's budgeted at $556,000. This is the code that they use to handle any main breaks, any other emergencies. Asphalt usually eats up a pretty good amount of that money as well. And if we have to call in the unit price contractor, this would be the funding source for that as well. So if you look at the pictures I'm showing here, this is a break that happened a few months back on Delaware Avenue. We were lucky enough, if you can call a main break lucky, that this was underneath the sidewalk and not underneath the asphalt. So the overall cost for this repair was around $17,000. If it had been under the asphalt, it would be at least twice that much. Also in this picture, you can see the cast iron pipe and the condition of that. I really wish I could say that this was an isolated area and that there wasn't miles and miles of this old cast iron pipe in our system, but that's simply not the facts. Most of the old parts of our system are this cast iron pipe. Just to give you some statistics there, the Water Distribution Department had responded to over 135 different breaks over this last year. Now, that's not all big, massive breaks in the road. A lot of times it's a service saddle or a service line that fails, and it may only be a few $1,000s to repair that. But then there's others, such as the big break we had over on Georgia Avenue last year that cost well over $50,000 to repair. Another big ticket item we have in the Water Distribution Department is the deployment of AMI at $850,000. We are estimating an installation of about 5,000 modules this next year. It's a very aggressive schedule. And in conjunction with that, when the guys are out there installing them, if the water meters are close to the end of their useful life, they'll go ahead and change those out at the same time as well. Moving over to the water resources, this is Lime Softener Unit 1 rehab. It's currently underway, budgeted this year at $365,000 and next year at $410,000. That was split into 2 fiscal years to help out with some budget constraints last year and actually this year as well. The last time that we did any major work on this facility was back in 2012. We've learned a few lessons since then. This was actually my project when I was still back in engineering. If you look at the picture over to the right, the above-ground pipe hanger, there is absolutely nothing that is storm hardened about that facility, and we will put it underground this time around. Moving on to the stripping tower transfer pumps. There are 6 of these that were installed in 1989. 2 of them were replaced back last fiscal year. This fiscal year there were none scheduled, but going forward for the next 2 fiscal years, we are planning on changing the last 4 out, 2 per year at $175,000 per. Moving over to wastewater, this is the IWRF bar screen retrofit at $155,000. This particular machine was installed in 1997. This is our first line of defense for the wastewater plant. Without this particular piece of equipment, pretty much everything downstream would be fouled, and we would have some serious problems. You'd be very surprised at some of the items that this little machine gets out of the wastewater system. That's pretty much all I'll say about that. Similar to the water distribution department, this project, mains, laterals, and R&R, is budgeted at $375,000 for the wastewater collection department. And again, this handles all the emergencies. Again, a lot of asphalt. A lot of funds are spent on asphalt for this particular code. The sinkhole you're looking at here is only about a foot, maybe 1.5 feet in diameter. It's obviously a much larger void underneath the asphalt before this actually pops up. Again, this is a relatively small one, but this one costs somewhere around $15,000. Sometimes these will be so big they could swallow a car, and $50,000 to fix a sinkhole is not uncommon. A sinkhole that pops up like this is something that the operations crews have to react to, and they usually deal with somewhere around a dozen of the reactive ones per year, as well as the other ones that they're able to be a little more proactive with. So what's the solution to this? Well, you can rip up the streets and you can put new sewer lines in, or for about 1/5 the cost, you can line those mains. We currently have a contract for up to $1 million per year with Miller Pipeline. We budget $500,000, which is $375,000 from wastewater collections, and another $125,000 from water and wastewater engineering to support their projects. And if you look at the picture on the lower left-hand side, that's a picture of the inside of a clay pipe, and obviously this one's in pretty poor condition. You can see all the cracks. Now, what that does is it allows the water to come in, the storm water to flood the sewer system, and then there's an expense to treating that at the plant and all of that good stuff. We all know about that. But what it also does is it allows the wastewater to enter the environment, which can cause pollution. However, that makes water quality grants available to us. This year we have applied for a state water quality assistance grant to line the lowest part of our wastewater system, which would be the remainder of the pipelines over on South Beach. We are requesting $813,000 for that grant with an $813,000 match. We are keeping our fingers crossed for that. All right, moving on to water and wastewater engineering. This is our customer base expansion program. This is budgeted at water for $525,000 and $200,000 for wastewater. There are 2 small neighborhoods that we're targeting this year. The first of which is at the intersection of St. Lucie Boulevard and 25th Street. It encompasses Harrison Way and Jefferson Parkway. Now you can see on the slide there are 36 different customers that are listed. However, some of those are actually duplexes, so we could potentially pick up more customers than just the 36. The sewer is pretty standard for this type of a program. It's a low pressure sewer system. So if those folks do become our sewer customers, we would have to install the grinder pump system and such, like we've talked about in the previous presentations. The other area we're looking at is a little neighborhood off of Okeechobee Road. This is just east of the new Starbucks. And again, there's a few things that we look for in these neighborhoods. For one, we're looking for the most bang for our buck, or more appropriately, the most customers that we can pick up for the least amount of money. And also we're looking for how close they are to the city limits so that we're able to support the city efforts with annexation. Okay, Longwood Hospital is currently doing an expansion, and the surrounding water infrastructure is not sized appropriately to support their fire flow demands. So they're in the process of upgrading all of the loops that support that, and as well as that, we are proposing to partner with them to put in a new 12-inch PVC line on Frisk Boulevard from 25th to about 23rd to support that, increase flow volumes, and even more importantly, to make it more reliable. And that's budgeted this next year at $250,000. MWRF deep injection well, number 1 monitoring well. That's budgeted this year at $750,000. It is possible when we get all the final numbers in that it'll be closer to $1 million. Just to give you a little bit of background here, the monitoring well does exactly what you think it would do, being called a monitoring well. It monitors the flows that go down the deep injection well to make sure that they are not migrating upward through the boulder zone and getting back into any of the upper aquifers that would affect us. Now, maybe a year and a half ago, the upper portion of that monitoring well failed. Staff went through a process to try to rehab that well unsuccessfully. However, the bottom portion of the well is still functional. So, excuse me, we've been working with the DEP to try to get a variance to only use the lower part of the monitoring well, and that was unsuccessful. They've come back and said, no, you have to replace it. The silver lining to this is we have a contract with FMPA, so there is a potential that they will pick up some of the costs of that new well, and what that portion that they'll pick up will be determined largely by Mr. Tom Peck's negotiation skills. Okay, moving on for there, last but not least, we have the downtown 16-inch force main. We have $500,000 budgeted for this year and $500,000 for next year. You can see 2 routes here on the screen. The red route would be preferred because it's more direct. However, there is a potential for permitting issues underneath the Avenue C underpass. If that is the case, then route number 2 would be the next route to be investigated. And that is the end of my presentation. If there are any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Any board member have a question?
Mr. Chairman, this is Linda Hudson. I have a couple of questions. It's on the 2 customer base expansion of the 2 different neighborhoods. Is there an approximate cost what it's going to be for the customer?
Well, the infrastructure in the streets, that will be funded by FPUA. That's part of our business model, and the business model is based on a 10% per year connection rate, which is the lowest connection rates that we have ever seen with examples such as a looping project, that there was no advertising, there was no incentives, there was nothing of that nature. And that even at a 10% connection rate per year is a good rate of return for us. So it's a good business decision for us to fund this ourselves. Now from there, you have your typical costs for the meter and the installation, initiation of service. I think all of that together is somewhere around, $900 on the water side, plus or minus. I don't have that number right in front of me. The wastewater side is a bit more expensive because you would have to install the grinder pump. You could have up to $9,000 is a pretty good estimate on what that would cost each one of the customers. And that sounds like a tremendous amount, but that is right in line with installing a new septic system. And I will also say that if these lines are available and there's other alternatives other than installing a new septic system, the St. Lucie County Health Department will work with us to mandate that those people connect to our system.
Okay, and then does the customer have to pay it all at the same time?
We actually have a finance program.
Okay.
That's very beneficial to them as well. It's 3 years at a low interest rate, and it's 1 year at no interest rate, 0% interest.
Oh, okay, good. And then a follow-up question, the Lawnwood, I understand from the city side that Lawnwood told the city they're postponing their expansion until 2021, but are they still going ahead with this preparation? And you're still going ahead with this preparation?
Yes, ma'am, absolutely. Our engineering group is working with them currently on sizing their on-site utilities, and we are moving forward as soon as this project is funded with starting on the design on Frisk Boulevard.
Okay. And my last question is the MWRF, is that physically located out at the property where the ESC is? Is that right? Is that where that is?
No, ma'am, that is on the same property as the TCEC, the Treasure Coast Energy Center.
Oh, okay. Got it. That's what I meant to say. I used the wrong initial, sorry. Yeah, that's exactly.
Yep. That's on the property that we pre-purchased years ago for the new
Right.
mainland water reclamation facility.
All right, okay. That's all my questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other board member? Boy, I have a couple concerns, and let me address the few of them in line like I've written them. The first one is all the cast irons, how much more cast irons we got in the ground?
How much more cast iron pipe?
Yeah, we have a lot of just...
Yes. Oh, it's a lot. Mr. Matthews, I can tell you all the old parts of the city are all cast iron. It is everywhere. Oh. We have a very aggressive, if you look through some of the line items there's a very aggressive R&R program that is independent of the other agencies, and we also do a lot of that R&R in conjunction and in partnership with the city of Fort Pierce as well. So it's a very tough one to stay ahead of, and unfortunately, it's very expensive and to stay out ahead of that, and you're not picking up any new customers either. So, whenever you start looking at these rates and what this costs and such, I mean, the simple fact is we have a very historic, very old city with very old infrastructure, and that absolutely plays into our budget.
Does we ever look at exploring grant assistance for projects like that?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I can tell you the lining project that I showed you earlier, we're asking for assistance on that. There are very few grants for water. The grants are more tailored to protecting the environment on the wastewater side. The water grants themselves, very few and far between.
Neighborhoods that we hear about, but we don't pretty much say it's a problem here, but I'm giving you example one, Orange Blossom Estate. It's looped around the stadium back in there. Do we have any major problems in that area?
I would have to look back at our R&R priority list to tell you, but that is an older neighborhood, so I'm going to say a simple answer to your question is yes.
Okay. All right. Mr. Tompeck, would you move us to the next project?
Yes, thank you. Next presentation is by Paul Jakubczak on the electric and gas capital project overview.
Thank you, Mr. Tompeck, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I'm happy to present to you some of the major capital projects that we have for the gas and electric departments. Next slide. The biggest thing we have on gas is how do we expand our 4,500 customer base to, one, bring in more customers, but also bring in more revenue, which in turn will decrease costs to all customers as we move forward. Next slide. So we've identified three areas that we would like to expand to: Lakewood Park, Indian River Estates, and Harbor Branch. Lakewood Park is a large project to get out to. The estimated costs are about $14 million. There are 8,500 customers out there. we estimate that if we had a 40% take rate on all of those customers, we're looking at about a 17-year payback. So as you can see, it's more of an economics to get out to Lakewood Park. We will be continuing to look at ways to get out there. The second one is Indian River Estates. We estimate about 3,200 total customers in Indian River Estates at a total cost of about $3.5 million to get out there. Our 40% take rate would give FPUA about a 13-year payback. We have already reached out a little bit with some mailers to the residents in Indian River Estates to look to determine if there is an interest to continue moving that way. The third area that we're looking at is Harbor Branch. We're estimating that this cost would be between $500,000 and $600,000 to get out there. Right now, there's about 2 to 3 customers out there. We have been working with the Harbor Branch folks, and we estimate that if they could actually budget the same amount that they do for propane now, which is about $70,000 a year, we estimate that their bills would cut down for gas usage to about $30,000. And if they can give us that extra $40,000 a year, we could probably make it happen within the next couple of years. Next slide. So some of the challenges that we have, of course, we've already talked about is customer take rate. One of the things that people do not really understand is the benefits of gas, and that's where we get into the education on the benefits of gas. It's a cleaning, burning solution, especially for cooking and heating water. The other option it gives people is during hurricanes, if your power is out, you still have a way to cook and take warm showers. But as you can see, the infrastructure costs are sometimes counterproductive to actually moving out and moving forward with that. We estimate also that the average cost of a customer with a gas heater for water is around $25 to $35 per month. If you take that into account of what an electric water heater is, you're probably looking at saving $20 to $30 a month just on water heating. Some of the opportunities that we're looking at to continue with our expansion projects is we're going to look at installing in the right-of-ways, upsizing pipe as we go through. One of the projects we're working on right now is Kings Highway. As we move up, if we continue on with this Harbor Branch project, it gets us closer to Lakewood Park and going down Indrio Road. The other thing we're going to be investigating is looking at some joint trenching with the county and also with electric projects. Now, the county is actually working on a project in Lakewood Park right now, a possibility of doing some drainage, maybe some new sewer projects, water projects. We're going to look at getting into joint trenching with them. Next slide. So how do we pay for all this? Well, right now we've budgeted roughly $200,000 a year for the next 5 years. There's also potential for some contribution and aid from the customers. And of course, we're going to continue looking at grant opportunities to expand our infrastructure. Next slide. Moving over to the electric side, we're going to talk a little bit about our transformer and 69 kV breaker projects that we've worked on. If you remember, a couple of years ago, we had approved our 2019 storm hardening and grid modernization plan. In that, we talked about changing 12 of the 69 kV oil-filled breakers that we have in our system with what they call an SF6 vacuum bottle type installation. Right now, we're currently budgeting $180,000 per year for the next 4 years. We have already installed 3 of these switches in this fiscal year, 2 at Causeway, 1 at Savannah. These are all going to be funded by rates and will improve the reliability of our electric grid. Next slide. The second portion of our 2019 storm hardening and modernization plan I want to talk about is our 69 kV to 13.2 kV substation transformer replacements. As you remember, because of the cost of these, which is about $600,000 a year, or $600,000 per unit installed, we're only budgeting to install 1 per year over the next 6 years. Right now, we're scheduling the first delivery of the transformer at Savannah in November with an immediate start of installation. All this is going to be funded by rates. It will improve the reliability. Currently, that transformer that I mentioned that's going to be installed at Savannah, the drawings are 90% complete. And once they are 100% complete, they will start production of this unit to get it delivered to us by November. Next slide. The next project we want to talk a little about is our pole replacement project. Currently, we have 587 poles on the books that are scheduled to be replaced. Part of our requirement is that we test 20% of our system per year to make sure that we are staying with the NESC and the NEC requirements for pole integrity to make sure that they don't just fall down. Next slide. So what are we doing? We budget $350,000 per year, and we're going to do that for the next 5 years. We figure that we will be able to get up and complete this 587 pole backlog that we have. Currently, we see roughly about 100 or so poles added to this list per year. We are seeing our numbers go down as we continually replace them. As I mentioned, this is a PSC requirement that we go through and test and change out these poles. We also follow all the latest NESC guidelines for replacement. This is also part of our reliability improvements. Recently, in the past 3 years, we've contracted out to help us replace these poles. The first year, we had a contract to replace 45 poles. The second year, we replaced a little over 100. And this year, we're finishing up and should be done within the next 2 to 3 weeks of a total of 224 poles replaced by a contractor. Now, this does not mean that our crews are not replacing the poles as well. It just supplements our crews to make sure that they are doing other things and helps us to catch up on that list. Right now, we're looking at probably contracting over the next 2 years to make sure that we're keeping up with our pole list, and this is all funded through rates. Next slide. And of course, the last project I want to talk about is our AMI project. We'll go through the next 2 slides briefly, as most of you have already seen this. So AMI, what are we doing? We're replacing all of our water and gas modules, as well as all of our electric meters to provide two-way communication between the customer premise and the utility. It's going to require all new meters and modules, as we discussed. It's also going to improve our efficiencies. Next slide. So what are the overall benefits? Well, we have to visit every single location where we have a meter, which is over 53,000 locations we have on our system. We're going to be able to turn on and turn off meters without having to send crews out, which will save us costs in the long run. It's also going to decrease response time, going to allow us to know when there's problems with a customer's voltage, potentially when they're out of power. We're going to know that before they call in. It also help us to detect water leaks before they become a major problem for our customers. Some of the benefits from our customers is they're going to have the ability to monitor their usage 24/7, which in turn will allow them to project their bills and also control their usage and conserve energy and save money. Next slide. So where are we with this? Since we got this approved and we're moving forward, we have installed a total of 640 modules and meters, as you can see on this map, which was created by Jason Drost, which shows where the meters are and what has been located or what has been changed out already. This map is as of Wednesday of this week, which I know is probably now close to 700, if not more total, as we continue to change out these changes on a daily basis. Currently, the objective of this is to change meters. If you draw a line from the north side of the Gator Trace and go south and pick up all those meters, as well as those from Repump 2 going south to the county line on the beach, that is what we are calling our pilot area, and that's where we're concentrating all of our meters. This next slide shows the utility portal of where the meters have been installed on the electric side. We're still working to make sure that our communication infrastructure is in place in order to be able to read all modules and meters and get them into the billing system. Right now, we are still looking at June timeframe to be able to do some training on the utility portal and the consumer portal. as we continue changing out meters and working towards a hardened communication infrastructure. Next slide. So with that being said, our advanced deployment, we're planning on being completed by the end of July of 2020, with testing and final approval for the advanced deployment area by September of this year to fix it into a fiscal year 20 budget. And once we get all the approvals, we will move to full deployment, as Mr. Hutchinson had mentioned earlier. So the next steps is we're looking at a 5-year deployment. We may accelerate that depending on, one, funding and also resources available to change out these meters and modules. As you can see, we've got 27,000 more electric meters, 20,000 more water modules, 4,400 more gas modules, and of course, all the communication infrastructure that is required. We're also anticipating the release of the consumer portal, where the customers will be able to see their usage and see their bills sometime in August of this year. So how are we going to pay for this? Well, currently we still have about $1.6 million left over from the FP&L line sale that happened back in 2018, 2019. Electric has budgeted $500,000 a year for the next 5 years. Gas has budgeted $136,000 a year for the next 3 years, and water has budgeted $850,000 a year for the next 4 years, which also includes their meter changeouts as they see needed for this. Right now, I must say that the team that we have put together doing the AMI is doing an exceptional job pushing forward and getting this through. Now it's just a matter of finalizing all of the communication infrastructure and getting the rest of the meters and modules installed so we can start looking at some of the data and start providing a better service to our customers. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
This is Linda Hudson. This is Linda Hudson. I'd like to ask a couple of questions. When you talk about the gas system expansion, remind me, do we do annexation agreements when we have gas customers?
We do not have that into the agreements right now.
Okay. And on those 3 expansions, do you think Harbor Branch is the most desirable because it's the least costly?
The reason that Harbor Branch is probably going to move forward is because they are very interested in the potential of saving themselves money in the future.
Okay.
Right now, we sent out a mailer to the residents of Indian River Estates and got very mixed reviews. A lot of their concern was that we were coming in there and taking over. I guess there was an issue a few years back that still leaves a bad taste in a lot of their mouths from the residents. So right now, we're reaching out and looking at all 3 of these areas, but right now it looks like Harbor Branch would be the one to actually move forward.
Yeah, I can't remember what that issue was, but that sounds vaguely familiar. I have another question on the AMI. So you're installing them, but there's no communication with the company yet. So the meter is physically there, but we're not ready to. The customer isn't right now able to use it. Is that correct?
That is correct. We are starting to see some of the reads come back through our utility portal, which we will use for troubleshooting. But until the infrastructure for the communication side is a little more robust, we don't want to roll out anything to the customers until it's completely been checked out and verified by the utility.
Okay, thank you. That's all.
How many customers that we envision that are in River State?
Indian River Estates has about 3,200 customers. If we got 1,000 customers out of that, we'd be happy. If we got 3,200 customers, we'd be throwing a party for you guys. But the issue is it's all about take rate and the customers understanding the benefits of gas as we're running through their neighborhoods.
But we have a service that's already in Indian River State, am I right? What? Our electric is already there, right?
We do not serve them by gas or electric. I'm not sure both. You know, on the water, wastewater side.
Yeah, they're a bulk water customer.
Okay. My other question deals with the my other question deals with the new meters. You know, a couple of neighborhoods gonna have some new buildings and stuff like that. Are we got a understanding about what we're gonna do with those new customers?
Any new customer, any meter that
you got 29,000 or 27,000, you might end up with more. It depends on what areas are to be built or improved.
We have started in the electric side, and the water gas side is a little different because they're just replacing modules. But any meter that gets installed on our system on the electric side is an AMI compatible meter. It may not be reporting back to the head-end equipment and reporting back to us electronically, but any meter that we install on the electric side will have these new modules or new meters installed, which will communicate once we get that communication infrastructure up to them. So, for instance, we have actually, over the past probably year, been changing out meters with the AMI type meters.
Okay. Any other board member got a question? We turn it back over to you, Mr. Tompek.
Thank you very much. Next presentation is FPUA Net Capital Project Overview, and Javi Cisneros will make the presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Tompek. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. It's my pleasure to present the FY 2021 capital budget for FPUA Net. Over the past few years, I've provided some background information about FPUA Net because it is still relatively new to our customers, so I think it's important to continue bringing it into focus with a little bit of history. In 1993, the fiber system was originally installed to provide high-speed communication between our electric substations. In the early 2000s, FPUA started using the fiber system for corporate services, which did reduce our third-party communication costs. So between the two systems, electric and corporate, FPUA was only using a very, very small fraction of the fiber capacity. So again, in the early 2000s, we began to provide communication services to other government agencies and business customers. The system has grown at a very slow pace because our current architecture is limited. Over the past 5 to 10 years, the board has approved several projects to help grow the system, but it has really came into focus in 2018 during the strategic planning session, where the board approved expanding the fiber system with the vision to become a smart city. So that's the history in a nutshell.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman. Javi, there it is. I was going to say your visual wasn't up, but now it's up. Never mind.
Yeah. Okay, no problem. So now let's try to tie the history into our budget with a quick overview. In 2019 and 2018, our budgets were small, and the majority of the money was spent connecting new customers with some system expansion, most recently centered around the Sunshine Kitchen Business Park on Research Center Road. I think in the next 5 to 10 years, we'll look back and be really happy that we planted our seed in that area, because this business park will be a huge attraction to Fort Pierce, especially with the expansion of Kings Highway. The main reason I'm highlighting this project is because it will be a common theme as we discuss system expansion and looking into the future with our crystal ball. Currently, we are projecting to spend about $463,000, which is about 40% of our FY 2020 budget. With this money, we're hoping to complete 4 major projects within the next 5 months. The first is upgrading our connection from 500 megabit per second to a 1 gigabit per second, with the ability to quickly upgrade to 10 gigabit per second connection. The second is the replacement of 2 1 gig core switches that are at the end of life with 2 new 10 gig switches. The third project is the completion of a high-level design for the Lincoln Park Smart Neighborhood Project. We actually received that report on Monday afternoon, so we are currently reviewing the report in great detail. The fourth project will be the design and installation of an OLT, optical line terminal, that will have the capacity to feed up to 4,000 customers. All of these projects are fundamental pieces as we continue to build our fiber utility. Now, moving on to 2021, we have budgeted $1.6 million, and we expect to spend around $1.2 million. So we'll take a quicker look at the FY 2021 budget project. Highlighted in red, projects 914 and 916 are driven by new customer requests, so we don't have too much control over these budgets, but these budgets are important for new customer growth. Highlighted in green, project 920 is a project that the board has seen before, but in combination with projects 919 and 921, which are highlighted in blue, are new to the FY 2021 budget, but all of these projects introduce a new paradigm shift. Instead of waiting for the customer, we're preparing to build our system to accommodate every parcel as we expand, replace, and repair our system. So digging a little deeper, I'd like to highlight the top 5 projects. Project 918 is an extremely important project because as we replace end-of-life components such as cable, we will proactively replace, for example, an existing 48-count cable with maybe a 96-count cable at a fraction of the cost with a plan to expand. Again, highlighted in blue, these projects will introduce a paradigm shift to help grow our system. Project 919 will use more rate-funded money to grow our system. We will still require contribution in aid of construction, but we will now be focusing on building our system instead of just constructing a service. This approach has worked really well for the water wastewater system over the last few decades. Project 921 is a great opportunity to work closely with our internal resources when water, wastewater, gas, or electric are rebuilding, relocating, or expanding. We will install a spare conduit in the same trench or a trench next to it at a fraction of the cost. This empty conduit will allow us to install fiber with very little construction, thus reducing the overall cost today and in the future. As I mentioned earlier, we did receive our high-level design from our consultant for Lincoln Park on Monday, so I'd like to bring back Jason Miller at a later date to provide an in-depth review of this project and its timeline. So you may be asking, how do we measure our success from our investments? Today, I'd like to use population growth. From 1911 to 1940, the city of Fort Pierce had an average yearly growth rate of around 7.7%. During that time frame, Fort Pierce built a power plant and a water system. These were essential services in 1911, and of course they still are today. We continue to have success from the 1940s to the 1980s with an 8% growth rate, but between 1980 and 2018, we had a 1% average growth rate. Through this time frame, we did have 2 recessions, but we also had some great periods of economic boom. So looking forward, how can FPUA help the city grow? I believe that in today's world, internet service is no longer a luxury, but an essential service for all of our customers. FPUA is in a prime position because we have over 110 miles of existing fiber backbone already in place, and a majority has been there for nearly 20 years. So how do we get there? We need to invest in ourselves. The FY 2020 budget provides an aggressive approach to expand the current system while incorporating new architecture to allow for more customer connections. An example of this new architecture can utilize one existing fiber strand to connect up to 32 customers. In the next 5 to 10 years, the technology will obviously change, and we could have the ability to connect up to 64 customers or even up to 128 with that same existing fiber strand. So I'd like to circle back to 1911 for just a second. FP&L was not ready to invest in Fort Pierce, so we built a power plant out of necessity. 9 years later, by the 1920s, only 35% of homes in Fort Pierce had electricity, approximately. Today, electricity is in every home, but fiber is not. So I believe that we find ourselves in the same position. We need to build our fiber utility out of necessity because it will be a long time before others invest in our city. So couple of challenges that we face. Construction timeline and the skilled workforce are hard to overcome, but I truly believe that today with the groups that we have working together internally, the Electric and Gas Engineering Group led by Mr. Lammers, the Information Technology Services Group led by Mr. Fryer, the FPUA Net Group led by Mr. Mittler, and obviously with the support of Mr. Tompeck and the board, I think we have the best team in place to make great strides over the next 6 to 12 months, and more importantly, over the next 10 to 20 years. So I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Linda Hudson, I have a question, and I'm really out of my depth with all of this language of technology. But so if there's a competitive market, who would be our competitor in this particular business? Would it be Comcast, or who's the competitor?
It would be Comcast and AT&T. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so if their fiber optic system is, if I have Comcast at home, they have a broader system and it reaches residences, and we don't. Our system doesn't yet, right? Our system is just business, right?
Yes, ma'am. We mostly focus on business right now. The difference is Comcast and AT&T do not use fiber right now to the home. They still use the copper lines to go to the home, and they do provide best of effort service. With fiber, we'll be able to provide the service that we tell them we're giving them.
And so, does this have anything to do with being able to accommodate or support 5G?
Not really. Not really.
Okay.
Yeah, we're looking to go wired to the home to provide the connection.
Right. Okay. So you can see I'm out of my depth here, but
no, good question.
But I'm glad. I'm very excited about this for us, because I think this is something that we need to be in the future. Even though I think our essential services are still, power and water and wastewater and gas. Those things we have to have for health, for health and safety reasons. But this is something that's very, very futuristic, and so I'm excited about it. Thank you.
You're welcome. I agree with you. I think that, given the pandemic that we've been through recently, I think Internet has been an essential utility for the workforce, not just for the workforce, but, for school. I mean, you name it. Everybody needs it. So I think we need it today. I think it'll be even a greater need in the future.
That's a very good point, because people were homeschooling and had to have the Internet. We had to have the communication because we were all at home. Good point. Thanks.
You're welcome.
It seems to me that someday in life, Mr. Mayor, I'm talking to you too, whoever sits on the boards or whoever is elected as mayor should still carry the commitment on up to a point. And it seems like we have, when new people come in, they seem to have their own self-agenda and divert from what the goals should be and the challenges should be. And I think that we, as a group, ought to leave a footnote, please follow through with some of these commitments, that we've started. Because there's no way we can say we won't have a growth in a city anymore. It won't be those days. We're going to have that growth. We just need to have it organized so it would be cost effective and the best, and we won't add no projects add in a personal project, but still the main challenge would be what we started out with. That's the way I see it. Okay, Mr. Tompeck, you got any more information for us?
That's the end of our formal presentations. We appreciate your attention. As I mentioned earlier, this is really just a draft budget. Now, you've only had it in your hands for 3 or 4 days. Please feel free to get with me if you have any other comments, and I'll be getting with each one of you as we modify the capital budget to bring it back in form. And other than that, Mr. Chairman, I have nothing else to add.
You probably got an announcement you need to make to the board. Are you presenting some information to the city at that next meeting?
Yes, I do a periodic presentation to the City Commission, and one of those will be on Monday night.
Okay.
And I'm going to give an update on some COVID-19 issues, as well as some discussions about the expansion projects and AMI and a few other things. That's correct. Thank you.
Now, for understanding, our meeting on Tuesday will be at City Hall.
Yes, the City Commission meeting on Monday night will be at City Hall, and also our board meeting on Tuesday afternoon be at 4 o'clock in the City Commission chambers. We're going to try to spread out similar fashion to what the City Commission has been doing. I think we'll be successful doing that.
Okay. Hear a motion for adjourn?
So move.
I'll second.
Move. Okay, motion moved and seconded. We will be adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Invitation.